You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably, with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Somebody there?
Hello, once again, to another journey into the unexplored, the unexplained Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
So what is this week's subject, Verna?
This week's subject is about a man who was a psychic, a reader, and he was Jewish and he was Hitler's psychic.
So is this kind of like a Rasputin's was to the Romanovs? Is that kind of how this guy was to Hitler?
Yeah, except that he was more widely known.
Guidance, soothsayer.
More than that,
Okay,
he was well known to the Nazis in Nazi Germany, and before that to the growing party. He was, and to everybody in Berlin and Austria.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll get into that. So what did you do this week?
Well, we just went walking on to a place in Orinda called Oak Park, and there's a lot of
Is it a cemetery?
no,
Okay, surprise.
no, but there's a lot of hiking trails. I know it sounds like it, doesn't it? But there's a lot of hiking trails and a lot of beautiful old trees, and there's cats that walk around. I didn't see any cats that day, but I was told there's cats that walk around there. A nice little park that the locals go to.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
that's all.
I recently, I know we did our investigation at the St. Francis Hotel here in San Francisco in Union Square. I recently did an investigation of that hotel again, only, in the actual room, Fatty Arbuckle's room, the same room that Al Jolson died in. Very small room, not nearly as big as people think, but since they had 3 rooms and they were all adjoined suites, it would seem like a big long room. Than it actually is. Cut up, it's very small. Not a lot of... I haven't really gone over any of my evidence yet that I recorded, but we had a little ghost box interaction, and not with the Fatty Arbuckle people as much as the Al Jolson stuff. We actually got some Al Jolson activity going on, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's an interesting night. It's an interesting place. It's so old. It's one of the oldest ones in San Francisco. So of course, I always have those feelings when you go into these old hotels.
Of course.
This is definitely one of those hotels.
Well, I remember when we did the St. Francis investigation, the feelings we got going into the old part of the hotel by
Yeah.
the side there. Yeah. So since we talked about that room in the last investigation, we weren't actually in the room, but we talked about it. What were your first impressions of the feelings you got when you were in that room? I know it's been renovated so many times, but
I mean, the layout is still the same. They didn't change the structure of the room. They've just painted it. Everything's painted a solid 1 or 2 colors these days when you go to hotels. Where it used to have old wallpaper and wooden stuff around it, the trim. They just paint it all one color now, and maybe a little bit of a color trim. So it still has the same characteristics that it used to have, but it's just... What's weird about the room, though, is if you walk in, it's literally a square, and on the right-hand side, as soon as you walk in, is what I would call a walk-in closet. Big closet, with a little bit of space. Probably used to have a bench with, people. I would say it would. I would call it a dressing room that they probably used to use. Like women would pop into these dressing rooms. There's a mirror. They could sit down. They could change right where
I
their
believe it,
clothes
especially
are
for
and come out.
Yeah, for a crowd like that. Yeah.
Now it looks like it's a place for people to put their luggage, their clothes to hang up.
Right.
But it's literally, you walk in it. It's pretty big. I was joking that it could be an apartment for rent here in San Francisco.
Could you never know? There used to be residents at the St. Francis.
Yeah.
Before it was strictly just
apartments,
hotels, so it
Yeah.
could have been an apartment for somebody at one point.
Yep. That one wasn't, though, because that's the oldest part, and those were always designated as rooms.
Right.
That you could have adjoining
Sure.
suites, but they were meant as hotels, whereas the apartments were later. Yeah, the bathroom's still there. That's where they put Virginia Rapp after it happened. They
Oh yeah.
give her a bath, just kind of cool her down or whatever, put ice on her. But yeah, I didn't really feel anything in the room specifically, but like I said, the ghost box, we got some interesting interaction on that, so it was curious. I'd be curious enough to go back and do it again and maybe get both rooms.
Sure.
There's 3 rooms combined, but it's like $800 if you do all 3.
At the time, they probably rented all 3 rooms for that big party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
So yeah, it was fun. It was interesting.
Cool. Yeah. And if anybody wants to hear about what we're talking about, we did an earlier St. Francis investigation a couple years ago where we got some really interesting activity on it.
Yeah, just go on YouTube and look for Ecto Portal and then St. Francis Hotel. That's the episode. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, that's one of our best shows, I
Good
think.
results from that.
Yeah.
Okay, stay tuned. How about we do the paranormal news?
Yep, we got some news.
Hello, welcome once again to the paranormal news. What do you got this week, Bruno?
Well, I have some news from the UK. This bar staff at the Coniston Tavern in Warwickshire said that they're convinced that the pub is haunted by a former tenant following a bunch of poltergeist activity that was caught on camera. And over there, they're really good at capturing things on camera. So what they mentioned was that some pint glasses in a pub appeared to explode, and this is and that the place is haunted by a former tenant who died upstairs. And they said that the shock explosion was actually captured on camera. With this, and the staff is now convinced that the tenant's ghost is still up to his tricks in a bid to steal drinks. They think he was probably an alcoholic,
No.
a heavy drinker. Yeah. So they said that thankfully nobody was hurt by the shattered glass, although it's fueled rumors of whether the pub may have, unwanted visitors or, some ghosts who still feel the alcohol addiction. So they said that there was other incidents, including one episode where another regular saw their glass slip into the floor. And, it's just been happening on a regular basis there. And they're kind of wondering, if it's the same ghost who's doing it, because apparently the person who died upstairs was a very heavy drinker.
Could be. I mean, it could be anybody, really. It could be anybody in the town or that used to go there all the time. It's obviously someone who's trying to get attention.
Obviously, yeah.
Like, hey guys, I'm still here. It's funny when you said that they record stuff more than like over here. I think A, it's because it's older and they're more aware. Mm-hmm. And they have a different attitude towards paranormal than they do here. Here, they poo-poo it and they shrug it off, or they just...
Over there, they're very open to it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if they're videoing, they're going to keep an eye on it and check their tapes. Whereas over here, they would just record over it. Could record over and over and never look back. Unless a crime happened or something.
It's interesting when you say that, because I talk with my American friends, and I have half of my friends who are believers in the paranormal, and they believe it, and they're open to it. And then half of them just kind of go, well, maybe if you're believing that kind of thing. But when I talk to my British friends, I said, is it haunted? They automatically go, oh, well, it may be. It's England, or they're very open and they don't even question it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just a lot older, too.
Right. Exactly. So. interesting contrast.
It is. Mm-hmm. So I have one a little different. Mysterious UFOs were spotted over Las Vegas in the end of April, so about a month and a half ago, maybe a little less. It was reported by 8 News Now. A man named Bill recorded some footage and commented that he's seen tourist helicopters flying around the Strip before, but that what he saw was much bigger and brighter. Both nearby Nellis Air Force Base and the Harry Reid International Airport denied any activity that night to account for the lights. He said it was weird. The lights just hung out for 5 minutes or so, and then they were gone. Now, I noticed in the news and stuff, this is happening a lot more. Vegas is getting a lot more activity.
I've heard about that over there,
New
especially.
Mexico is.
Yeah.
Near the naval bases again. The Air Force Base, Naval Base. You know, all the bases seem to have more activity lately.
I'm not sure that's good news.
Well,
considering what's going on in the world.
Maybe they're worried that we're going to blow ourselves up.
I'm wondering about that.
We better keep an eye on these monkeys to see what they do. It's funny, when things heated up, you always see this more UFO activity. But yeah, and you saw recently a guy came on the news flat out saying, we have alien structures, we reverse engineered them, they do exist, it's real. It's funny, now you see these people just going on the news.
And just talking about it openly, whereas before
it
they would be all poo-poo and they would say...
camouflage their face and their voice and...
Or they would say something like, it's, they would say, oh, that was really a canister you saw. It wasn't a flying saucer.
It's a weather balloon.
Or they would say it was something similar in shape, you know.
We were just doing tests. The Air Force was doing tests or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's and I wonder if this was the government's way of slowly, you know, just right in front of your face, just putting stuff out there.
Slowly getting people used to the idea.
Yeah. So rather than just say, yes, aliens are real and we've had known for decades, just sort of let it out. A little at a time, just let it out. Eventually, it'll be normal.
Well, I think society's changing too. I think people are slowly becoming accustomed to the idea as we advance in technology and our space advance, that there's a very real possibility. So they're not completely surprised by the government coming on and saying, we think this could be something.
And you're up against technology because everybody has a camera in their hand now.
Right. So
you can make video, take pictures. Everybody everywhere has a camera.
Can you imagine the same attitudes 100, 200 years from now?
Oh, they'll probably laugh, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, but they had cameras.
So if people are listening to this podcast 200 years from now,
just
remember that we realize that it's going to be a completely different attitude towards this whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, that's the paranormal news for this week. Until next week, and now let's
get on with the show.
All right, what is this week's topic about?
This is all about Hitler's psychic, Jewish psychic. I didn't even know he had a Jewish psychic until...
That's ironic, isn't it?
It's very ironic. I came across it while reading a book, and I thought, wait a minute, what Jewish psychic? For Hitler? What? So I went and I looked him up, and I found out so much about this guy. And I thought, wow, this guy deserves a story. His name was Erik Hannussem. He was born Hermann Steinschneider, and he was born June 2nd, 1889 in Vienna. And he was an Austrian Jewish publicist and clairvoyant performer who lied about his origins. And he was acclaimed in his lifetime as a mentalist, occultist, astrologer, and a hypnotist. And he was active in Weimar Republic, Germany, and also at the beginning of the Nazi era. He's known to have instructed Hitler in his performance and achievement of the dramatic effect. You know, when he shouts his voice and he does his hand gestures, you know.
Yeah, very rigid.
Yeah, you know how he was very dramatic in his speeches. Mm-hmm. Well, apparently Erik taught him that.
Okay.
Yeah. And although he claimed to be a Danish aristocrat, he was in fact a Moravian Jew, born as Hermann Steinschneider, and his father, Siegfried Steinschneider, was an actor and a caretaker of a synagogue who married Antony Julie Kahn in Vienna, Australia. So,
Vienna, Australia?
Austria. What is my
I'm like,
problem?
wow, they went down under to get married.
What is my problem? I am sorry, folks. I know Austria.
I said, I've never been to it, Vienna, Australia.
Why did I say that?
I don't
Anyway, silly me. Oh well. Anyway, he starts out very young. His parents were poverty stricken, and apparently there was his youth was chronicled in an autobiography that he would publish in 1930, and he talked about early signs of clairvoyance during his childhood, and he had a restless nature, and he said that it pushed him into the circus as a teenager. So at 14, he apparently captured the heart of a 45-year-old woman and ran off with her before heading for Turkey and convincing sailors that he was an opera singer. So,
Okay.
I don't know. I mean,
Sounds like he's already a con artist.
yeah, he's already exaggerating. I mean, convincing people he was an opera singer. He must have had a voice of some kind.
Well, if his dad was an actor, it was in his blood. Obviously, this kind of stuff was natural for them.
Right, exactly. So he already knew how to act and
Yep, go with the flow.
Go with the flow, exactly. So he decided to change his name during World War I. He began entertaining small theaters in Vienna, and he wanted to avoid being labeled a deserter. So throughout the war, he impressed his fellow soldiers by steaming open letters, reading confidential information, then resealing the envelopes and announcing his mental powers had brought news from home. So
That's an interesting way to do it. I've never heard of anybody doing it that way.
I've never heard of anybody doing it that way either, but
So he would, just by what you said though, it
Yeah.
sounds like he gets the letter, he steams it open, reads it, and then reseals it and tells them with his magic powers what the word is from home.
the word is from home.
So in other words, he's already read the letter,
Right.
puts it back in, seals it, and then tells whoever it is, the soldiers, here's what the word is from home.
He must have had to do that really quickly if he was performing.
Well, he had to have somebody in on it, right? To get all those letters and
I
access?
would think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. And,
Again, con artist.
con artist, there you go. So by the 1920s, he migrated, he moved to Berlin. And back then, Berlin was a very busy metropolis. And they were open to psychic performers in Berlin. It was considered a very advanced city, very modern, advanced city at the
It's a
time.
shame what happened to Berlin. Actually.
I know, it really was. Yeah. So he used to put on shows in Berlin that combined mentalism. He did seances, he did mind reading, and he did other types of performances like finding objects hidden in theaters while blindfolded. And
That's so random and weird, isn't it?
I know. So
Like, we lost our hammer in the wall. Can you find out which wall? Oh, sure, put a blindfold on.
So there were people who knew he was a fraud, but they were usually, but usually he apparently was very popular.
I can see he could do so much for so many people.
Right, and a lot of people came to see him. So the people who thought he was a fraud was outnumbered by people who really liked him.
Which is not untypical for psychics and mediums even in America. As long as you have a following that's strong enough, you can survive all that.
Right, and he always insisted that he was the real thing.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Yeah, of course he did. I wondered about him because I wondered if in some ways he might have had the real thing, but he covered it up by giving all these performances. How could you can only keep that up for so long, can't you?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, to me, if he had the real thing and he was able to use it, I think he would have been better off. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I
have a hard time with psychics anyway. You know that. So
I do know
This guy's
that.
story screams fraud to me.
Oh,
but
it totally screams fraud. Totally. So, anyway,
Hitler believed it.
Well, he did, and so anyway, in Berlin, his Danish cover, his Danish. Anyway, his Danish name and his great wealth were looked upon favorably by the Nazi Party, who were at that time trying to get into politics. People didn't take them seriously at the time. They were just known as the Workers' Man's Party, and they were a small.
They wanted a place at the table.
Right, they were kind of a small fringe group at the time. So he entertained the officers in his private boat. He had a private yacht. And he entertained them in limousines, and he had a large, wealthy apartment, and he would invite them there. And he also had a weekly newsletter that he published with predictions of Hitler's rise to power, and he would do the horoscopes for the Nazi officers, and he would have their picture and all their horoscopes there.
Wouldn't you be afraid to do the horoscopes for the Nazi officers? Because what if it went wrong?
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, oh God, I got that one wrong.
Well, I would think so too, but here's the thing I have with that. If he hired a real astrologer to help him, they probably were able to see, according to the birth date, the person's houses and planets, and do a kind of a scientific type chart.
I'd just be worried if I was a fraud. I'd be real worried. Even if I studied up and did know that stuff, I'd still be afraid if I got it wrong.
Right. Well, he probably hired a professional to help him, or he probably studied astrology and he knew how to make it look scientifically.
That's probably what he did.
Yeah. And also, number two, they were a small fringe party at the time, and they weren't the big, awful party they turned out later, so it probably didn't. So probably to him, it wasn't a big deal. He didn't think that.
Not yet.
Yeah, you got what I mean. So anyway, so he published a newsletter. He did their horoscope, and one of the things that really got everybody's attention was that he claimed that Hitler would come to power and take over Germany, and at the time it didn't seem very likely.
Yep.
Right. So they also liked him for other reasons. The Nazis liked to gamble at the time. They went to gambling halls. They were often needing money. And one officer, his name was Count Wolf Heinrich Graf von Heldorf. He was named on several IOUs that were held by Hannussem. He loaned them money. He loaned he was a stormtrooper, I guess.
Wait. He loaned them money? The psychic loaned them money, or they loaned the psychic?
Yeah, Hannussem loaned them money.
Wow,
yeah.
He must have had some money.
He had a lot of. He apparently he got wealthy through all of this, so he loaned him money.
The more jobs you can do, the more money you can make.
To cover his gambling loss. So that way, I think that was also a way in sort of keeping people under his belt. You know,
absolutely. They owe you money. You'd be like, they'd be more opt to be nice to you, help you out.
So So in doing so, he felt that, if Berlin was being taken over by the Nazi Party, he probably had something over them. He probably felt that they owed him something. Yeah. So we all know that at the time it was getting violent and ugly. So it could also been that he was doing it to save and help himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway. His sympathies, and they didn't know he was Jewish, found favor with them, the fact that he was this performing psychic. And at the height of his fame, he met Hitler in a restaurant in the Hotel Kaiserhof, where he had taken up residence. And he didn't tell him what his real name was. And he had no reason, so Hitler didn't suspect anything. So he talked with Hitler, he had many talks with him between 1932 and 33, and he read his palms, he did readings for him, and they also spoke over the phone, and he told him, you are going to rise to power. And actually, there's another incident where he actually went to Hitler's hometown, and during the full moon, he buried a mandrake root in Hitler's full town. In Hitler's hometown. And I think that was so that's
What's the
interesting.
significance of that, though? Why would you do that?
To well, if it's during the full moon, it means that you are you're bringing in something. So
Okay.
probably to bring more favor to him, so that he could rise to power.
I figured that had to be a reason that he did it.
Yeah, and interesting that he used a mandrake root, because mandrake root was used to bind. Mandrake roots are used to usually bind people, so it could have been that he did it.
It means binding him to his future.
Yeah, something like that. So it's interesting that he learned spell work, and I wonder if he had access to grimoires or to ancient occult spell work.
Hard to say.
Hard to
Might
say,
have.
but if
it
he
sounds
look-
like he'd studied a lot of different.
He studied a
areas.
lot of that. So if he had an occult magazine and he did a lot of articles about it, he obviously knew a lot of that stuff. And unfortunately, he used it for the wrong purpose, in my opinion. But anyway, so he believed that his charm could get Hitler to see another side of the Jewish faith. He thought that it would be he would be helping himself, and of course, we all know he was very wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he continued to perform, and he found himself under scrutiny from a local newspaper, from newspaper commentators who shared the Czech concern that he was defrauding the public. One paper published the accusation that he was not Danish but Jewish, and he got mad and he tried to reframe the narrative and insist that he merely been adopted by Jewish parents. So
Interesting. So he was getting nervous.
he was getting nervous, and unfortunately it was too late, because his origins were discovered by Nazi officials who had every reason to doubt him, because wealthy, performing, popular. They probably thought, who is this
Yeah.
guy? So there was talk among the officers that they were in debt to a Jewish man, and of course we all know how they felt. They didn't like that.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So he dug himself into a bigger hole in February 1933, following a fire at the Reichstag. It was in February 1933. And the fire consumed Nazi territory, which was said to be the work of communists. But the day before, he hinted of a great blaze that would dramatically impact the area. So it was
Psychic prediction, or are you a rebel that caused the fire?
he said that he hinted of it. So it was theorized that he'd gotten word of the arson, which was never solved,
Yeah.
from Helldorf, who might have known of plans for the Germans to set the fire and frame Nazi opposition in order to obtain complete control over civil liberties. So it meant that he couldn't be trusted with confidential information. They wondered how he knew that. So
I would be the first person to question, like, wait a minute, you mentioned this the other day, and now it happened. Is it because you're a psychic, or because you were aware it was going to happen?
and you betrayed confidential information, right? So anyway, this happened on March 24th, 1933. He was late for a performance, and the stagehands were trying to find him, and he was hustled from his apartment by stormtroopers, and he was shaken down for his IOUs. So they obviously brought that up, and once the IOUs were retrieved, officers shot him 3 times and left his body in a forest where it was discovered by lumberjacks. He was age 43. And
Wait,
actually,
did they kill him and leave his body in the forest?
yeah, they shot him 5
Okay,
times.
they
Yeah.
shot him, okay.
Yeah, actually, 5 times. They shot him 12 times. They found 12 bullet holes.
Good Lord, make
And-
sure he's dead, I guess.
His body was left there for a long time, and apparently animals ate the part of the body.
Lumberjacks found it.
But the reason why they were able to identify him was because of the expensive suit that he wore, and I think it had. I'm not sure, but I think it might have had his initials on it.
That's
But
how bad animals got to him then.
yeah, but because of his suit and the way they were able to identify him.
You'd wonder the whole time what would happen to Hitler. Like, did Hitler, like, know about any of this was going on? Did he approve of it? Did he make it happen? Did
Well,
he,
you know,
show some remorse because he knew the guy? You know what I mean?
Well, before his death, he actually wrote a letter to a friend that he considered their Jewish persecution to be an election trick, and that was big mistake.
Sounds like current political agenda with people from Mexico, and sounds like a current same thing again.
Unfortunately, history tends to repeat itself,
Look at
but
this
we
hand.
hope.
Don't look at this hand. Look at this hand. Look what this hand's doing.
Right,
Not this
and
hand.
we hope that history doesn't repeat itself in that extreme way, because it was.
But we're stupid monkeys.
We're
so
hoping that people learn from all of that, but
we don't.
I think that he mistaken the fact that he was wealthy.
Yeah, he probably thought, oh, I'm sure.
I loaned them money.
Yeah.
Hitler and I are friends.
Yeah.
I'll be, I'm going to
Well,
get.
that tells you how bad it was.
It tells you how bad it was and how the hate was really.
Yeah, it didn't matter what he did for Hitler.
Didn't matter.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I don't care how much somebody is a fraud or what kind of or what they did. Nobody deserves that.
No, that's why we have to make sure it doesn't happen to this country.
We have to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he had a wife and he had children.
Now,
And
did they live back where he came from the whole time?
well, I think one of the children was from his mistress.
Oh.
Yeah, he had a daughter, Erika Fuchs Steinschneider. She was born to his first wife, Theresia.
So she was back where he came
Yeah,
from.
he was actually married. And after their separation, I think he was married a couple times. So he was married to Theresia Lukschik in 1920, and after their separation, she resettled with her daughter in Italy, where Theresia eventually married, and she divorced a Mr. Fuchs, heir to a brewing company. And also he had a son born to a mistress. The son was
Now,
put...
but what happened to his family? If they were also Jewish, did they get captured by the Nazis eventually?
I
Or
don't...
did they stay in Austria where they couldn't?
I don't hear what happened to his father
Yeah.
or his mother, but
I mean,
apparently
his
the-
ex-wife and his
Well,
other
the-
kid. What I mean,
actually, the ex-wife, if they went to Italy, I don't know. Italy, I know, was affected by all of that too.
yeah.
But I don't. I tried to look on what happened, and I couldn't find what happened to the family. But the son actually survived. He was put in an orphanage, and he survived the war. And he also became somewhat famous performing as a clairvoyant too.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he did it for fraud reasons or he did it because the kid actually had some abilities and he wanted to use them. So, but it's an interesting story, and it shows you how using powers for political purposes can get really ugly.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ugly.
So, and I think that the Nazis had several, a couple of occultists who work with them, besides him, and they were all really into it. But apparently, they never heard of karma and coming to bite them back in the butt, So they weren't into that part because it was just something to gain power.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that story, and it's a very sad one, and one I think we could all learn from.
Well, the reason I asked before about, it seemed a lot almost like Rasputin and the Romanovs, is Rasputin was very, I'll be whatever you need me to be, Your Highness. I'll be your soothsayer. I'll give you advice. I'll help you with this. I'll help you with that. But I think even Rasputin was doing stuff to stay alive and continue going along and live in the means that he liked. I think this guy is similar in that way. Like, let me get close, because if I'm close and protected, as long as I perform and do my duties of what he wants of me, I should be okay. But it proves that's not the case. That's not always the case, and this is a prime example of that.
That's a prime example. It's not the first time though that there have been people who were into the occult, or people who had powers behind politics, because we know then back in medieval times, ancient times, and even back in the Roman times, there were a lot of people who worked behind the government to help them back in Roman times, they would turn to the priests and priestesses of the temples to help them.
Yeah.
Medieval times, they had the Druids who helped with the politics. So it's been happening throughout history, but it can go the wrong way.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right. That
Yep.
was an interesting story.
very.
All right, folks. Until next week. See you later.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden. Be sure to visit us at www.ectoportal.com. Check out our archives on YouTube and head on over for new episodes to ectoportal.podbean.com.